I'm going to go ahead and start taking these pressure plate bolts out. 12 millimeters. I think there's 6 of them in it. You take them out. Some type of trash that falls out of the pressure plate as I rotate it. I don't know what that debris is. Clutch may have had a problem of some kind. Just can't see it yet. Little pieces of burnt stuff coming out of it. It might be exploded, I don't know. Bricky's loose, I just put a wrench on it. Just tap it with a hammer. Do that in a circle. Get them all broke loose and then just start backing them off. Got all the bolts out of the pressure plate. Clutch cover, whatever you want to call it. One of those got some burnt places on it, but no ribs. The wear indicators are kind of wore off in places. Yeah, I guess it's wore down pretty good. The pressure plate didn't seem real strong either. This has a pull type clutch in it, or a diaphragm. The release fork goes underneath of this throwout bearing. It pulls on the fingers to release them instead of depresses them. Because this is, the throwout bearing is pretty noisy in it. The old one. I feel about a 0.04 of an inch difference in the wear area and where the pressure plate mounts. So I'm going to have it flattened out in machine shop. That's too much. 12 points holds the flywheel bolts on. Be extremely careful you don't knock your motor off the jack stand by jerking on anything rapidly. I just used a 1/2 inch drive ratchet with an extension to break those loose. We'll be real careful around these teeth. Any impacts to the skin, and they're extremely hazardous to flesh. They're razor sharp on the corners, and if you hit them with your knuckles, you're going to wish you hadn't. So you should really wear gloves around working around these teeth. I'll put a paint mark on the bottom bolt hole on the flywheel just in case it doesn't have any dowel pins or anything, which I don't see at this time. Be careful with this flywheel. It is particularly heavy and awkward coming out of there. It'll drop like a rock, especially when you take the last bolt out. It's fairly dangerous. Just ease it down. Matching paint mark on the lower bolt hole in the crankshaft. Flywheel's out of there. It's got a ridge on it. And every bit of ridge that's in here is that much less pressure you got on your clutch. Barely noticeable, but it's there. I'm going to put a scratch mark on this steel. If I take it over and have them turn it, it'll take the paint off, probably. Got the flywheel back from the machine shop today. New surface on it. nice and grippy. And flat. That'll make the clutch work well and last longer. Diamond pattern. This is the new clutch kit, pressure plate. Good name brand. Luke. Yeah, the fingers look a little bit heavier than this other aftermarket brand. Be sure to keep any solvents, cleaners, any type of contaminants off the clutch disc. It can't be contaminated with anything. This flywheel and pressure plate should be hit with some brake cleaner to degrease them. This is a clutch alignment tool. Goes in through the clutch disc and into the flywheel. It's going into the flywheel on this brand. Into that hole in the flywheel, and that aligns the clutch, centers the clutch on this flywheel, so the transmission splines will pass through it when you're putting it back on the dowel pins on the engine. This kit also came with a tube of lubricating grease for the splines. I have to put a light coating of grease on the splines inside the clutch and on the transmission splines. I need to pull this shaft up out of here and get it greased up in its bushings, and the bearing tube and the splines. And go ahead and pull this shaft up out of here. It's got a bushing around it. Pull this bushing up, then turn the shaft sideways and push it out the bottom. This arm comes up, knock it back down, and then that'll free the bushing up. Stay off to a smooth area. Lift it up out of the bottom bushing. Clean the rust off of this. Need to clean this bearing retainer up with the clutch slides on, and clean the splines up with a small brush and a little bit of brake cleaner with a rag or something. And make sure the clutch splines slide on this shaft without any problems. If it gets hung up, you need to replace the shaft or file the burr off of it, or you got the wrong clutch. Best check that before you put it in there. Try to put it in there. This shaft's pretty rusty around that top bushing. The bottom looks good. I'm going to go over the shaft with some 320 grit sandpaper. Check this throwout bearing release fork for the arms being ground down on one side or the other, not being evenly wore, and or being wore out, no bumps on it. This one seems alright. Got the shaft cleaned up. That one had a little bit of rust on it. Put a light coating of high temperature wheel bearing grease where the bushing wear areas are on the top and bottom, and this little patch on the throwout bearing arms. Stick it back in the transmission, and I'll be putting a thin coating. I washed this out with some brake cleaner, some penetrating oil, and then some brake cleaner. Dry it all. And put a light coat of grease inside this and on the outside of it. This bushing has a reference notch, and there's a slot in the top of the transmission and it fits down into. Before you put your shift fork shaft back in, take a wire brush, saturate it with some brake cleaner, and rake these input shaft splines out towards you to get any old grease off of them. Check input shaft for any play. If it is, you'll have to put a new bearing in there, I guess. Looking better already. You take your clutch and stick it up on the splines, make sure it fits. Flat side always faces the flywheel. Make sure your hands are oil free, grease free. Got just a little tiny bit of sideways movement. Now this slides like a piece of cake. Good shape. Yeah, that's good. Good to go. I'm going to go ahead and install this clutch fork shaft back up in there. Drop it into the lower bushing. Top bushing back in. Got a little notch on it. Goes with this notch right here. That's nice. Nice and smooth. It was creaking before. Now I'll get the throwout bearing. Put some grease on the ears of it. Some grease right under these catches on each side. Okay, these are the grease points, the top and bottom of both hooks. And that center rib sleeve. Just a light coating. Nothing you want flinging off and hitting the clutch disc. See, this has a raised up lip on the end of the throwout bearing. That snaps into this clip on the pressure plate. When it's installed, you push the arm backwards the way it normally works, and this will lock that in. You do not want to lock it in now, or you'll never get it together. Let's go ahead and stick this throwout bearing on the shift fork and put just a little bit of grease on the tube that this slides on that holds the front bearing back. Okay, the clutch disc came with its own grease, the greasy splines. I'm going to use it. I suppose it's really super critical, but far be it for me to circumvent manufacturer procedures necessarily. I'm gonna go ahead and stick this throwout bearing on here. Feed the throwout fork as it goes down on there. Wipe the excess off. That's nice. I've degreased the pressure plate and the flywheel. I'll go ahead and use this little tube of grease they supplied with the clutch kit. And just, I really would prefer to put it on this side, feed it in from this side here. Just a light skinning on these splines and on the transmission splines. Alright, there's a light coating of grease on the splines. Now to put some on the transmission splines. Be sure not to touch the clutch disc with any greasy fingers, or any of the friction material anyway, and wipe any excess that can fling off. I've rotated the transmission shaft and put a light coating of that grease all the way around it. Wipe any excess off the end of the shaft. There won't be any need for any grease right on the tip of it. Now that's prepped up, make sure the crankshaft's clean and flat, dry, no dirt. And here's the alignment mark for the flywheel. I'll mount the flywheel back on. Have a look around, see if anything else is leaking or damaged while you're under here, like a rear main seal. Any evidence of problems with it, now's the time to change it. I chained the flywheel down with a couple of bolts, piece of chain. Same way I took it loose. The flywheel bolts in a crisscross pattern to 90-95 foot-pounds. It's actually like 90-96, but 90-95 would be alright. I went over them twice just to make sure that they're all down. Checking and got plenty of clearance for the clutch alignment tool. I slipped the pressure plate while holding the clutch up in there and just started two of the pressure plate bolts real loose. Just turned them a couple turns till they bit on. Now I'm rolling the motor, rolling these bolts around to the back to get the front so it'll sit on there flush. Make sure your hands are grease free. Don't get a face full of clutch either. Clutch once, I guess it might hit the dowel pin, but get this all the way up to the edge of this dowel pin, it'll go down on the other ones. I suppose I could stick the alignment tool in there now. I couldn't fish it up in that gap with the assembly. I've rotated the engine and put all the bolts in the pressure plate. Just kind of run them down with my fingers so the clutch is dragging pretty good. And that clutch alignment tool comes with the kit. It ain't the best thing in the world, but just kind of wiggle it around to find the center and slide it in and out and make sure it bottoms out against the flywheel and get as close to center as possible all the way around the opening for the release bearing to clip on. And then just gradually crisscross these bolts down a quarter a turn first. Check and make sure that your clutch alignment tool stays centered as best as possible. Check that several times, and then as you get it to within an 1/8 inch, then turn these bolts half turn at a time in a crisscross pattern, like 6 to 12, 9 to 3, and so on. 6 to 12 o'clock, 9 to 3 o'clock, until all the bolts are down to 11 to 15 foot-pounds. Once you get the pressure plates bolts down to 15 pounds or so, go around and check them twice. Make sure they're all where they're supposed to be. Sure everything's pre-lubed on the splines. I run this tool through the clutch a couple of times and wiped off any excess come out the other side. That clutch alignment tool. All the bolts are down. Now that the pressure plate's all torqued down, I'm going to go ahead and install this clutch release arm. It has a 2-tooth area and 2-tooth area missing on this, so you can't get it misaligned. Make sure that the sleeve is pointing up. That's the downside. This has to hit the stopper right here. This had a flat washer and a lock washer on it. I'm putting that there because this arm could potentially shoot the throwout bearing out far enough and get on top of it instead of being caught in the ears that works it back and forth. Now that's as far as it can go. I don't have to worry about pulling the transmission back apart because the throwout bearing got on top of the arm. So, go ahead and slip this on there.